Welcome to our video for high leverage practice number 15, provide scaffolded supports. There are 22 high leverage practices for supporting students with disabilities grouped into 4 domains. HLP 15, provide scaffolded supports, falls under the instruction domain. The major sources for content in this video is the chapter by Troy Mariage and his colleagues in the HLP for Inclusive Classrooms book published by Routledge and CEC. This video is divided into 2 parts. Part 1 defines scaffolded supports and provides rationale for their use. Part 2 shows teachers using key aspects of this HLP across a range of settings. Part 1, definitions and rationale. Scaffolded supports are supports provided to students that are either pre-planned or provided on the spot and then faded or removed once they are not needed. A teacher or teams of teachers use data to make decisions about when scaffolds need to be removed or kept in place. Scaffolded supports are common outside of education settings. For example, when learning to water ski, young children may begin on an inflatable platform pulled slowly behind a boat. When the child has mastered the balance and coordination necessary at this level, she may use more traditional water skis that are connected at the front and back to provide stabilization. Once the child has mastered skiing with this support, she can graduate to fully independent skiing, one water ski on each foot without being connected to each other. This process of providing necessary supports in the moment when learning new skills is illustrative of scaffolded supports teachers can provide in the classroom. Scaffolded supports are flexible and numerous, with options ranging from the simple to implement, including visual aids such as anchor charts, checklists, and graphic organizers, as well as more complex and longer-term instructional supports such as reciprocal teaching or self-regulated strategy development. Content enhancements, such as those created and researched by the University of Kansas Center for Research on Learning, are well-known examples of scaffolded supports. While some scaffolded supports are planned long in advance by teachers, others can be added on the spot when teachers notice that students are not responding to instruction or progressing or developing in a skill. Teachers can provide scaffolded supports for only students who need them, with either a whole class or small group setting. An example might be leaving an entire worked math problem on the board for the student to reference, or they might provide the answer to the first step of a multi-step problem, and then leave the rest for the student to complete. Another important decision teachers make with regards to scaffolding is when to remove the supports. Consistently observing and monitoring students' progress is key to knowing when students are ready for less guided practice and more independent practice. Providing scaffolded supports connects to other HLPs, such as creating long and short-term learning goals, HLP 11, systematically designing instruction to address those goals, HLP 12, and making adaptations to support student needs, HLP 13. As teachers apply these HLPs, they are likely also thinking about which scaffolds will be logical and useful and when to deploy them. Teams of professionals with input from family members should also use various sources of data to make important decisions about logical scaffolds to utilize. Another HLP is use of explicit instruction to teach students how to use scaffolded supports. Scaffolded supports are attractive as an option for teachers and students, given their relative ease of use and utility for showing relationships between concepts or helping support students in completing a task. However, Simply providing students with a support like a graphic organizer is not the same as explicitly teaching students how and when to use that support. Instead, teachers need to be purposeful and deliberate in using explicit instruction around how to use the scaffolded support and provide students with meaningful feedback on their use. More information about HLP 16, Use Explicit Instruction, is available in Part 2 of this video and on the HLP website. In sum for Part 1, providing scaffolded supports is a critical practice for teachers of students with disabilities. Scaffolded supports can take the form of visual aids or strategies that teachers teach to students. Teachers can provide scaffolded supports at all stages of learning in response to the needs of individual or groups of students. This HLP is intertwined with several other key practices and can be used by the thoughtful educator to help address a range of student issues and needs. Part 2. 3 essential steps of providing scaffolded supports. There are 3 essential steps of providing scaffolded supports. 1. Explicitly teach students to use scaffolds and then prompt students to apply them in the appropriate situation. 2. Evaluate performance using scaffolds. And 3. Fade supports. Component 1. Explicitly teach students to use scaffolds and prompt appropriate use. Scaffolded supports should clearly connect to the content that's being taught, and teachers should make this connection explicit. However, teachers should not take for granted that students know how to use a scaffold. Therefore, taking time to explicitly teach students the steps associated with using the support is essential. Key elements of explicit instruction include lots of clear cues, using clear language, providing opportunities to respond to various prompts paired with feedback, modeling use of scaffolds across different examples and situations, providing guided practice opportunities, and allowing independent practice coupled with feedback. For example, teachers often encourage the use of graphic organizers in writing instruction. In this case, the teacher should take time to explicitly introduce and teach how and why the graphic organizer is used for the specific task at hand. Student understanding of how and why to use the graphic organizer should be confirmed through a range of opportunities to respond and practice opportunities. In addition to the explicit lesson on how to use the tool, something often forgotten is the need to provide students with explicit cues on when to use the tool. Explicit cues often take the form of a verbal reminder, but can also be gestural or physical, as required by students' needs. For example, the teacher should say, "Okay everyone, it's time to take notes during science. Take out your question exploration guide and get ready for today's big question we will answer." In this exemplar clip, watch as the teacher introduces a guided notes scaffold to a new middle school student learning to take notes for the first time. An explicit lesson was developed specifically around how to use this scaffold with embedded practice opportunities. Hey everyone, you ready for science today? Yeah? Okay, great. I'm really glad that you're here today. Today's goal is what? Read that for me.
Learn how to take notes in science.
That's exactly what we're going to do today. Now that you're a 6th grader, you have to learn how to take notes yourself. Okay? This is a very important skill because when you are in science, social studies, language arts, your Spanish class, your health class, you have to be able to listen to what the teacher is saying and write those things down so later on you can look at those notes and study so you're ready for tests and quizzes. So this is really important. So today we're going to have a lesson on how to take notes, and I have a special note-taking form that I have printed out for you. So there you go. So it says Introduction to Note-Taking at the top. And we're going to talk about 2 quick science words that we've already been talking about, observation and inference, so that you can take notes. And you're going to use that form to help you record your notes so everything stays nice and organized. Okay? So the first word is what?
Observation.
Observation. Excellent. And an observation is?
Using one or more of your senses to gather information.
That's right. And what do you see this
This
person.
kid is looking at ants.
Yeah, and how is he doing that?
With a magnifying glass.
So what would that help him to be able to do?
Find an observation about information or an observation.
Yeah, and so the magnifying glass would make the ants look
Smaller, bigger.
bigger, so he could see them really carefully. So here's what I want you to do. So in science, when I put up a definition like this, your job as the student in 6th grade is to take notes. So look at your note form, see where it says observation, and see where it says definition, and I've put an arrow. Go ahead and write that definition into that box. Go ahead. And I like the way that you're writing really quickly, but also making sure that you're writing it accurately. Excellent work. Okay, but a lot of times in science, we're doing more than just writing down the definition. I'm also going to be giving you lots of examples that you need to think about. So think about one thing you see. So if you're doing an observation, what's the definition of observation again?
Using one of your one or more senses to gather information.
So what are some senses?
See.
Sight, good.
Sight. Hear.
Hearing.
Feel.
Feel. What's another one?
Taste.
Taste is exactly right. I love that. So on your note sheet, I've asked you to write down one thing that you can see in your environment right now, one thing you can feel in your environment right now, and one thing you hear in your environment right now. So you're taking observations, you're making observations, and right there on your form, I have the spaces laid out for you to record that information. Go ahead. All right, so great job taking your notes on your note-taking form. So what was one thing that you see?
My paper.
You see your paper, okay? Maybe, what else could you see? Did you see your...
My pencil.
Pencil.
You.
Teacher. The computer screen. Okay, so there were a whole bunch of observations you could have made with your eyes. What was one thing that you could feel?
My pencil.
You had the pencil in your hand, maybe your desk.
Yeah, my desk.
Desk or the paper. Okay, good, good. And one thing that you heard?
The rain.
You could hear the rain outside of our classroom today at school. So no problem. Excellent job. Okay, so now our second word is?
Inference.
Okay, so how do you think you're going to use your note-taking form? So when I put up the definition for inference, what are you going to do?
Write it down.
Where are you going to write it? Right there in the space that I provided for the definition. You are doing a fantastic job paying attention, and you are applying your science skills really nicely. I'm really proud of what you're doing right now. All right, class, you did a great job with your first chance to take some notes using your note-taking form. Later on in our course, I'm not going to give you that note-taking form anymore. You are going to learn to take notes on your own in your science notebook, and you're not going to have this support. So I'm going to keep giving you these note sheets for a while until you get comfortable and good at it. But then later on, you can do it all by yourself because you're going to learn. How does that sound?
Okay.
All right, let's move on to our next task. Component 2, evaluate performance using scaffolds. Teachers should monitor whether a support is effective in moving students toward their learning goal. This means teachers should give students multiple opportunities to practice with guidance and independence. When teachers provide multiple opportunities to practice a skill with supports, they should assess whether the students have connected the use of the scaffold to the successful performance of the task. For example, a language arts teacher using a checklist for the components of a paragraph should monitor whether students' finished paragraphs reflected the steps being shown on the checklist. If they do so, the support might be effective. If they do not, the teacher should reteach or consider a different type of scaffolded support. As teachers monitor progress, it is also important that feedback is provided to students on how well they're using that scaffolded support. This is a great chance to reinforce the use of the support, particularly if the student is noticing that completion of tasks is easier and they're making learning and performance gains. Component 3, Fade Supports. Individual teachers should use students' performance data to make decisions about the effectiveness of all instructional approaches, including the use of scaffolded supports. For bigger decisions, the entire instructional team should be involved. Therefore, the decision on when to fade a support to see if the student can perform the skill on their own should be guided by data in some instances, but also teacher observations and records. However, just as students need plenty of opportunities to practice with the support, they also need plenty of opportunities to practice without the support when ready. Feedback at all stages is essential. It's typically not a good idea to have a student go cold turkey without supports after becoming accustomed to their presence and use. Instead, a gradual fading, under the teacher's watchful eye, will result in more confidence on the part of the student, and likely better outcomes as well. An example might be a student using a number line to solve math computation problems. As fading takes place, the student turns the number line over to see if they can solve without that scaffold. During the fading process, teachers should continue to guide students as they practice without supports in order to gradually release responsibility and move toward independent practice without supports. Also, at this stage, it is once again very important that the teacher provide ample, specific feedback on student performance. In conclusion, providing scaffolded supports is a key practice for all teachers, but especially those of students with disabilities. Teachers should provide scaffolded supports at all stages of learning, in response to the needs of individual or groups of students. Students need multiple opportunities to practice with and without scaffolds, and teachers should provide plenty of specific feedback on students' progress with and without scaffolds. Finally, teachers should consider how and when to fade supports. More information about scaffolded supports and their role in supporting the needs of students with and without disabilities can be found on highleveragepractices.org. Thanks for watching, and please continue using resources from this series on high leverage practices for students with disabilities.